everybody! I recently watched a video from someone I subscribe to about her sun care routine. She says that she does not have to wear sunscreen because she has a raw vegan fruitarian diet. And while I don't want to directly respond to that video, it inspired me to talk about my sun care routine just to let you know about the importance of taking care of your skin while you're through hiking. While most hikers on the AT probably don't wear sunscreen, I was always vigilant about my sunscreen use because I have a family history of skin cancer, and I believe in the importance of taking care of your skin and protecting it from exposure to excessive UV rays. So I think that the problems of sun exposure outweigh the potential issues with the chemicals in sunscreen, although I know some people disagree with me, but in the end, I think that it is worth it to be wearing sunscreen every day. And I'm going to give you some pointers on how you can do that. There's a popular idea that the AT is a green tunnel, and so that you will not need to have any sunscreen basically because you'll never be in the sun, but I found that not to be true. There are times where you're walking on the ridgeline pretty much every day as the trail goes up and down, and so in those periods the sun cover will be sparse and it will be brutal if you don't have any sun protection at all, and in other periods there just isn't super great sun coverage, especially as you get further north and kind of the terrain gets rockier and stuff. So I do recommend always having sun coverage on the AT, and I think that while you may not have constant sun exposure, there are also times where you're going to be hitchhiking into towns or other things like that, and you're going to be on an exposed patch of road. It's just when you're outside, it's really hard to know exactly when you're going to be exposed to the sun, but there will be periods of time where you will, and it's better to be prepared than to not have any kind of way to protect yourself. The biggest recommendation that I can make for protecting your face from the sun rays is definitely to wear a hat. There are several advantages that a hat has that are really good when you're out constantly in nature. I thought that it was annoying at first, and I know a lot of people find it irritating because you have to have this band around your head all the time, which can feel a little constricting until you get used to it, and also it can cause you to sweat a little more around the hairline, which is unpleasant, and also you have to keep track of another item, so it can be a little bit of an annoyance, but overall I thought it was a big advantage. The number one reason that I recommend using it is because it protects your face from unnecessary sun exposure, which can age your skin and also lead to an increased risk of skin cancer. You are 3 times more likely to develop melanoma even if you get a painful sunburn once every 2 years. So it doesn't take that much frequency of sunburn to really experience negative impacts from that sunburn. And it not only is good for your health to protect your face from the sun, but it's also good for aging. So if you don't want any kind of unnecessary aging to your face, I also recommend covering with a hat. It's not that big of an inconvenience, and it really can help protect you from something that can really age your face. The second reason that I recommend wearing a hat while hiking on the AT is because it can reduce fatigue. I found throughout my hike that when I wasn't wearing the hat, everything was brighter, and so I had these brighter sun rays hitting my face all day, and I found that it was more tiring to be exposed to those all day than to have a brim kind of blocking out the top of the sun rays. So I thought that it was really helpful to be able to protect the top of my vision from that brightness. It made me less tired at the end of the day. For that reason, I would also recommend bringing sunglasses because those can also cut down on your fatigue. At the end of the day, wearing a pair of sunglasses and a hat, you'll feel much less fatigued than being outside and not having either one of those, at least in my experience. The third reason I really liked my hat, which is kind of an incidental reason, is because it allowed me to hide my hair when it got really sweaty. It also contributed to the amount of sweatiness in my hair, so kind of the band and the cloth being there definitely made my scalp sweatier, but when it was sweaty, it was a good thing to kind of disguise the roots, which were really greasy. So it was good for all of those reasons, and really I think that having a hat is a great idea and really essential. I would even recommend, I've since gotten a more complete hat, one of those hats that's like a Legionnaire's hat style. It has the hanging down cloth section around the back to protect your neck, and I think that that is an even better hat. In the future, I will probably always wear a hat like that just because it's not that much heavier and it provides so much more complete protection than just the baseball cap that I was wearing. If you are a man or a woman who has short hair, especially like a military style or buzzed, which sometimes people do on the AT, especially during tick season if they want to keep it off their scalp. I especially recommend one of these hats. My hiking partner experienced some sunburn on his scalp from not wearing a hat and not wearing sunscreen on it. So definitely be especially vigilant if you have short hair. It can be a real problem getting a sunburn on the scalp, and then really painful and itchy. In addition to a hat, I also highly recommend that you carry sunscreen with you to apply onto your body and face and to reapply it regularly. I personally preferred lotions to the sprays because I find that sprays have kind of a noxious application process. The spray hangs in the air and bothers other people, whereas the lotion can be applied more discreetly and doesn't bother people. So I strongly preferred the lotions, and I also like that with lotions you don't have to worry as much about it leaking, the liquid leaking out of your bag, which has happened to me in the past with the spray. So I recommend the lotions over the spray. If you're concerned about ounces, you may be wondering, how do I get enough sunscreen for a 3 to 5 day resupply and also have not too much weight that it'll be a big hindrance, since a lot of sunscreen bottles are really large. And I recommend that you carry, there are these little travel sized sunscreen containers that you can buy at any drugstore, and you could get a couple of them and it would only be 3 ounces, and you'd have enough to last you the 3 to 5 days between towns. And it's really worth it in terms of having that protection instead of having to worry about getting a sunburn. My other recommendations are definitely to get something that is an SPF of 30 plus. It's been shown that high SPFs aren't necessarily that much more effective than 30, so 30 is typically less expensive, so I would recommend maybe going on the lower end if you're on a budget for sunscreen. Just go with the 30 or the 40. And also another thing to mention is that since you're sweating a lot, reapplication is super important. I would recommend reapplying. You're supposed to reapply every hour, and I think I reapplied every couple of hours probably. A lot of the time I wasn't in direct sunlight, so it was not, I didn't feel it was as pressing always to reapply, but I tried to remember to reapply every couple of hours. And you should probably try to find waterproof or athletic sunscreen if possible, so that you can have a little bit of sweat resistance, although I'm not sure how much that sweat resistance actually brings to the effectiveness of the sunscreen. This is kind of maybe a little silly, but one nice thing about sunscreen is that it has kind of a good smelling sunscreen can have that odor that is so distinct, and that can mask a little bit of the odor of your pack and your sweat. So just keep in mind that it won't totally make it go away, obviously, but it will allow you to maybe stink a little less or have a little bit of a mask on that. Also, if you are aquablazing the Shenandoahs, be especially vigilant about sun protection in that period of time, as you are no longer in the forest and covered with trees some of the time. You're going to be out on the water where there's not as much tree coverage, and additionally the sun and the river can create a greater degree of reflection on each other, so that can make you exposed to even stronger light. So there were a bunch of people whom I saw who were exposed to like very strong light and got really sunburned in that time. So I would recommend definitely either considering long sleeves maybe, or something with high SPF sunscreen. There were people on the trail, especially at the beginning and after the Shenandoahs, who actually had to take time off due to very severe sunburns and had to recuperate from their burns. And I saw firsthand from other people who had gotten really burnt on their shoulders and then were struggling with like putting their pack back on after they got a bad burn on their shoulders, that it's really unpleasant to be hiking when you have a bad burn. So definitely from the beginning you should be thinking about that and planning for it, because the early months, especially even March, even though it's not necessarily going to be warm in Georgia and the weather might not be super nice, you will still have plenty of sun exposure. And even when it's snowing, and especially when it's snowing, because the sun can reflect off the snow and make it even brighter, you have to be careful about applying sunscreen to any areas that are exposed to the sun. If you are very light complected, or if you are worried particularly about sun exposure, I do know that there are some great moisture wicking clothing options available in long sleeves that will allow you to not have to be out in the sun as much, which I plan to use on future hikes, but which I didn't purchase on this one, partly due to cost and partly because I didn't quite know how much sun I was going to be seeing, and I ended up seeing more than I expected, I think. So you should look into them. Two options that I have seen are Marmot and LL Bean, but I'm sure there are a bunch of others. They supposedly keep you cooler than fabrics that are short-sleeved because they wick away your sweat as you hike. I personally am a little skeptical of them because I haven't experienced them, but I'm going to be trying them at some point in the future, and hopefully I'll get a better idea and be able to review it for you because I'm excited for those kind of products. I also want to mention that this is not a sponsored video, so again, any brands that I mention in this video are my own research and not sponsored by the brand itself. It's just my own opinion on brands that might be a good option. If anyone has any recommendations for a brand of sunscreen that's relatively inexpensive but also is cruelty-free, like they don't test on animals, I would appreciate hearing about it because I am looking to be more mindful in the purchases that I make. So I'm thinking about trying the Trader Joe's sunscreen. I'm not sure if they have a lotion option because that is what I prefer at this point, but if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear about it. As always, I am open to your suggestions, and thank you for watching. Let me know if you found this video helpful. Happy trails!